He fostered her for years, giving her the love and support she had never known. But during the adoption hearing, when the judge asked for her consent, her answer stunned everyone. With her voice trembling yet determined, she made a shocking condition that no one saw coming. Why did she make this bold demand? And what lengths will he go to prove that their bond is unbreakable? Stay tuned for this unforgettable story of faith, family, and a dream that changes everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through Adam Reyes's living room window as he sat in his well-worn leather armchair. Scattered across his lap were foster care applications, each one telling a different story of a child in need. His reading glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he carefully reviewed each document. Since losing Sarah 3 years ago, the house had grown too quiet. The silence seemed to echo through the rooms, broken only by the occasional hymn he played on the piano or the sound of his choir rehearsals at church. Adam ran his fingers through his graying hair and sighed, feeling the weight of his solitude. Then he saw Trinity's file. His hands trembled slightly as he read about the 15-year-old girl. The social worker's notes painted a picture that tugged at his heart. Severe stutter, socially isolated, shows remarkable resilience. Something about Trinity's story resonated deeply within him. The following Tuesday, Adam sat in the sterile waiting room of the foster care office, his hands clasped together in prayer. Mrs. Lane, a kind-faced social worker in her 40s, led him to a small meeting room with pale blue walls and generic motivational posters. "Trinity will be here in a moment," Mrs. Lane said, smoothing her pencil skirt. "She's very nervous about meeting new people, so please be patient." When Trinity entered the room, Adam's heart ached at how small she seemed, despite her teenage years. Her dark hair fell forward like a curtain, partially hiding her face. Her fingers gripped a worn notebook so tightly her knuckles were white. "Hello, Trinity," Adam said softly, careful to keep his voice gentle and warm. "I'm Adam Reyes. It's wonderful to meet you." Trinity's eyes darted up briefly before returning to the floor. She gave a slight nod but remained silent. "I'm the pastor at Little Hope Community Church," he continued, keeping his tone conversational. "We're small, but we love music. Our choir might not win any awards, but we sure enjoy making a joyful noise together." At the mention of music, Trinity's grip on her notebook loosened slightly. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction, and she peeked up at him again, this time holding his gaze for a moment longer. The drive to Adam's house was quiet but not uncomfortable. As they pulled into the driveway of the modest 2-story home, Trinity's eyes widened at the sight of the cheerful yellow roses Sarah had planted years ago, still blooming faithfully each spring. Inside, Trinity stood in the living room, taking in her surroundings. Her gaze lingered on the upright piano against the wall, sheet music neatly stacked on top. Various framed photos showed Adam with his choir, his warm smile consistent in each one. "Are you hungry?" Adam asked, heading toward the kitchen. "I made lasagna. Nothing fancy, but it's my mother's recipe." During dinner, Trinity ate small, careful bites, still not speaking. Adam filled the silence with gentle stories about the church and the community, never pushing her to respond. Later, as Adam cleared the dishes, he noticed Trinity had drifted back to the living room. She stood near the piano, her hand hovering over the keys but not quite touching them. Adam quietly approached and sat on the bench. He played a simple melody, one of the first songs he'd learned as a child. The notes filled the room with warmth, and Trinity's eyes followed his fingers as they moved across the keys. "Would you like to try?" he asked softly. Trinity whispered, I can't." But her eyes remained fixed on the keys, a spark of interest visible beneath her uncertainty. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as Adam flipped pancakes on the griddle. 2 weeks had passed since Trinity's arrival, and their routine had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Trinity sat at the small breakfast table, her shoulders less tense than when she first arrived, though she still kept her eyes focused on her plate. "The choir's working on a new piece for Easter," Adam said, sliding a golden pancake onto Trinity's plate. "It's challenging but beautiful. You should come watch practice tonight." He kept his tone light, making it clear there was no pressure in the invitation. Trinity picked at her pancake with her fork but gave a small nod. Adam smiled, recognizing even this tiny response as progress. That evening, Trinity slipped into the back row of the church sanctuary, trying to make herself invisible. The wooden pew creaked slightly as she sat down, causing a few heads to turn. Ms. Evelyn, a silver-haired soprano with kind eyes, gave her a gentle wave. The choir director, Mr. Peterson, worked through a particularly tricky section of harmony. The altos struggled with their part, their notes wavering uncertainly. Trinity leaned forward slightly, absorbed in the music. When the choir attempted the passage again, she unconsciously hummed the correct note under her breath. Adam, standing in the tenor section, heard the pure, clear sound coming from behind him. He turned, catching Trinity's eye. She immediately looked down, her cheeks flushing red. During a break, Adam walked over to where Trinity sat. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "Would you like to join us? We could use your ear for harmony." Trinity's hands twisted in her lap. I can't," she whispered, her stutter more pronounced under pressure. Too many people." "That's okay," Adam assured her quickly. "You can stay right where you are." The choir members made an effort to welcome Trinity, offering warm smiles and gentle greetings as they passed by. Ms. Evelyn stopped to chat with Adam, making sure to include Trinity in the conversation without expecting responses. As the weeks passed, Trinity began to feel more at home in Adam's house. She still spent most of her time in her room, but she would occasionally linger in the living room when Adam played the piano. Her love for music was evident in the way she listened, completely still, absorbing every note. One evening after dinner, Adam pulled out an old leather-bound hymn book from the bookshelf. The pages were worn soft with use, and some corners were dog-eared from years of marking favorite songs. "This was Sarah's favorite," he said, running his hand over the cover. "She used to mark all the songs she loved best." He held the book out to Trinity. "Would you like to look through it? Maybe pick one you'd like to hear?" Trinity hesitated, her fingers hovering over the offered book. After a moment, she carefully took it, handling it as if it were made of glass. She slowly turned the pages, scanning the familiar titles. Finally, she pointed to a hymn, her finger trembling slightly but determined. It was her first real step toward sharing in their mutual love of music, and Adam felt his heart swell with hope. The following Wednesday evening, the church sanctuary buzzed with quiet conversation as choir members settled into their usual places. Trinity sat in her familiar spot in the back pew, clutching her worn notebook. Adam stood at the piano exchanging quiet words with Meredith, the choir director. Her expression was skeptical as she glanced toward Trinity. "Are you certain about this, Adam?" Meredith asked, her voice low but firm. "We have standards to maintain." "Trust me," Adam replied with gentle confidence. He turned to face the congregation, clearing his throat. "Trinity, would you come up here, please?" The murmuring grew as Trinity froze, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Ms. Evelyn, sitting nearby, gave her an encouraging nod. Trinity's legs felt like lead as she stood, but somehow she made her way to the piano. Her hands trembled as she gripped the smooth wooden edge of the instrument. "It's just like when we practice at home," Adam whispered, positioning her beside him. The familiar scent of old wood and sheet music helped calm her racing heart. Trinity stared at the floor, feeling dozens of eyes on her. She could hear whispers, some curious, others doubtful. Her throat felt tight, and for a moment, she considered running back to her seat. Adam's fingers touched the piano keys, and the first notes of Amazing Grace filled the sanctuary. It was the hymn Trinity had chosen from Sarah's book, the one they'd been practicing together for the past week. The melody was simple, familiar, and comforting. Trinity closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice, clear as crystal and pure as morning light, soared through the church. The whispers stopped instantly. Even Meredith's stern expression softened in surprise. As Trinity sang, something remarkable happened. Her stutter, which had always held her back in speaking, disappeared completely in song. Her voice carried the melody with natural grace and emotion that touched everyone who heard it. Ms. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Several choir members exchanged amazed glances. Meredith stood perfectly still, her arms crossed but her expression thoughtful. When the final note faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Trinity opened her eyes, her cheeks flushed. The entire congregation sat in stunned appreciation. "Well," Meredith said, breaking the silence, "it seems we've been blessed with an unexpected gift." Though her words were measured, there was a new respect in her voice. The choir members burst into spontaneous applause, making Trinity jump slightly. Ms. Evelyn beamed from her seat, and several others offered words of praise and encouragement. As the rehearsal drew to a close, Adam placed a gentle hand on Trinity's shoulder. "I am so proud of you," he said softly, his eyes shining with genuine emotion. Trinity looked up at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. The first true smile Adam had seen from her. In that moment, something shifted between them, a fragile trust taking root and beginning to grow. The kitchen filled with the warm aroma of spaghetti sauce as Adam stirred the pot on the stove. Trinity stood beside him at the counter, carefully tearing lettuce leaves for their salad. The routine had developed naturally over the past few weeks, each of them finding comfort in the simple tasks they shared. "Can you pass the tomatoes?" Trinity asked, her stutter less pronounced than it had been when she first arrived. Adam handed her the container with a gentle smile. "Would you like to slice them, or would you prefer I do it?" "I'll try," Trinity said, accepting the knife he offered. Her movements were careful and deliberate as she worked. The kitchen timer chimed, and Adam drained the pasta while Trinity finished the salad. They moved around each other with growing ease, no longer the awkward dance of strangers sharing a space. After dinner, they settled at the dining room table with Trinity's homework spread before them. She frowned at her English assignment, an essay about family traditions. I don't know what to write," Trinity admitted, her pencil hovering uncertainly over the blank page. Adam pulled his chair closer. "You know Sarah, my wife, she used to help her students with essays like this. She had a special way of getting them to open up about their stories." Trinity looked up, interested. "She was a tea teacher?" "Yes, high school English, just like your class. She loved helping students find their voice." Adam smiled at the memory. "She would start every class by playing music, said it helped create the right atmosphere for creativity." "Really?" Trinity's eyes brightened. "Oh, yes. She had quite the collection of classical music. Sometimes we'd spend entire evenings just listening to different pieces." Adam's voice grew soft with remembrance. "She believed music could speak when words failed." Trinity nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. As Adam continued sharing stories about Sarah's teaching methods and her passion for music, Trinity began writing, her words flowing more easily. "Sarah would have loved hearing you sing," Adam said quietly. "She always said music was God's way of giving us a glimpse of heaven." Trinity paused in her writing, looking thoughtful. Do you miss her very much?" "Every day," Adam admitted. "But sharing these memories helps keep her spirit alive." Later that evening, Trinity stood in her room, holding a framed photograph Adam had shown her earlier. It showed Sarah sitting at the church piano, her face bright with joy as she played. With careful movements, Trinity placed the photo on her nightstand, arranging it so it caught the soft light from her bedside lamp. Adam passed by her open door and stopped, noticing the photograph's new place of honor. His heart filled with emotion at this simple gesture, Trinity's way of embracing not just her present with him, but also the past that had shaped him. In that moment, the line between foster parent and family began to blur, replaced by something deeper and more meaningful. About a couple of years passed, with Adam taking care of Trinity just like he did his own child. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Adam and Trinity approached the imposing courthouse building. Trinity's blue dress, carefully ironed the night before, fluttered slightly in the wind. Her small notebook, filled with carefully written thoughts and feelings, was clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. Adam adjusted his tie, his fingers trembling slightly. He had waited for this moment, prayed for it. But now that it was here, his heart thundered in his chest. He glanced at Trinity, noting how she had styled her hair the way Sarah used to wear hers in the photo on her nightstand. Inside the courthouse, their footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Mrs. Lane, their social worker, greeted them with a warm smile and guided them to the correct courtroom. The wooden benches creaked as they sat down, waiting for their case to be called. Reyes adoption hearing, the court clerk announced, her voice clear and official. Judge Harper, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind stern glasses, looked down from her bench as Adam took the stand. His voice wavered slightly as he began to speak about the past months with Trinity. "Your Honor," Adam said, "when Trinity first came to my home, she barely spoke. But music gave us a language we both understood. I've watched her bloom like a flower opening to the sun." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "She's become more than just a child I'm fostering. She's the daughter of my heart." The judge nodded thoughtfully, then turned her attention to Trinity. "Young lady, do you consent to being adopted by Mr. Reyes?" Trinity stood slowly, her fingers working the edges of her notebook. The courtroom fell silent, waiting. She glanced at Adam, who gave her an encouraging smile. Taking a deep breath, she lifted her chin. I will," she began, her stutter less pronounced than usual. "But only if—" She paused, gathering courage. "Only if Adam promises to let me join the Starlight Youth Choir." Gasps and murmurs filled the courtroom. Mrs. Lane's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The judge leaned forward, intrigued by this unexpected condition. Adam's mouth fell open slightly, caught off guard by Trinity's bold statement. But as he looked at her determined face, he saw not defiance but hope. Hope for a dream she'd carried silently all these months. "Trinity," he said softly, standing up, "I would never stand in the way of your dreams. If the Starlight Youth Choir is what you want, we'll find a way to make it happen. I promise." Judge Harper's eyes crinkled with warmth as she watched the exchange. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted from shock to something softer, more tender. As they left the courthouse, Trinity's small hand found its way into Adam's larger one. He squeezed it gently, his mind already working through the logistics of helping Trinity achieve her dream. The Starlight Youth Choir was prestigious and selective, but looking at Trinity's determined face, he knew he would move mountains to help her succeed. Adam's fingers moved across his keyboard, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through the Starlight Youth Choir's website. The morning sun streamed through his study window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Each click revealed more requirements that made his heart sink a little deeper. Tuition, $3,500 per semester, he read quietly. Competition travel expenses, uniform costs, private vocal coaching. The numbers added up quickly, far exceeding what his modest pastor's salary could easily handle. Trinity stood silently in the doorway, her sock-covered feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. She watched Adam's face carefully, noting how his shoulders tensed with each new piece of information. Her notebook was clutched to her chest, as always, but her grip was tighter than usual. Later that afternoon, Adam sat across from Judge Harper in her chambers. Her office felt smaller and more intimate than the courtroom, with law books lining the walls and family photos on her desk. "Pastor Reyes," Judge Harper began, removing her reading glasses. "I understand your commitment to Trinity, but I need to ensure this adoption serves her best interests. The Starlight Youth Choir is an ambitious goal." Adam nodded, his hands clasped in his lap. "I know it won't be easy, Your Honor, but Trinity's happiness means everything to me." "It's not just about happiness," Judge Harper explained, her tone gentle but firm. "We need to see that you can maintain a stable home environment while supporting this dream. The choir requires significant time and financial commitments. How will you manage church duties, Trinity's education, and these new responsibilities?" Adam shifted in his chair. "I've been looking into additional work opportunities," he said. "The church board has approved me teaching music lessons after services, and I'm considering private piano students." Judge Harper made some notes. "I'll need to see a detailed financial plan before proceeding with the adoption, Trinity's emotional stability must come first. Back at home, Trinity was practicing scales at the piano when Adam returned. She stopped playing as soon as he walked in, searching his face for answers. "Everything's going to work out," Adam assured her, managing a smile despite his uncertainty. "We just need to make some plans." That night, after Trinity had gone to bed, Adam knelt beside his own bed, hands clasped in prayer. The moonlight cast long shadows across his room, and the house was quiet, except for the gentle ticking of the hallway clock. "Lord," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to make this happen, but I know you brought Trinity into my life for a reason. Please show me the way forward. Give me the strength and wisdom to be the father she needs." His prayer continued in silence, his heart heavy with both determination and doubt. The challenges ahead seemed enormous, but when he thought of Trinity's face lighting up while she sang, he knew he had to find a way. The Sunday morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. Adam stood at the pulpit, his hands resting lightly on its edges as he looked out at his congregation. The usual sermon notes lay untouched beside him. "Family," he began, his voice warm but carrying a hint of vulnerability. "Today, I want to share something personal with you." He glanced at Trinity, who sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on her lap. "Many of you know Trinity has a gift, a voice that can touch hearts. But what you might not know is that she has a dream." The congregation leaned forward slightly, their attention captured. Ms. Evelyn, seated near Trinity, reached over and patted the girl's hand gently. "The Starlight Youth Choir represents an opportunity for Trinity to share her gift with the world," Adam continued. "But the costs—" He paused, swallowing hard. "The costs are beyond what I can manage alone." Before he could continue, Ms. Evelyn stood up. "Well, we're not letting that stop our Trinity," she declared firmly. Other members nodded in agreement, and soon the church was buzzing with ideas. By afternoon, the church grounds had transformed into a hub of activity. Tables lined the parking lot, loaded with homemade pies, cookies, and cakes. The seniors had outdone themselves, with Ms. Evelyn's famous apple pie taking center stage. Young adults set up a car wash station, their laughter and enthusiasm drawing passing cars to stop. Trinity moved between the tables, helping where she could. Her stutter was less pronounced as she worked alongside church members who treated her like family. She carefully arranged Mrs. Johnson's chocolate chip cookies, wrote price tags with Mr. Peters, and even managed to smile at customers who came to support the cause. "Would you like to try the L lemon bars?" she asked a young couple, her voice soft but determined. "Ms. Evelyn made them this morning." The support continued throughout the day. Children emptied their piggy banks, elderly members wrote checks, and families donated what they could spare. Every contribution, no matter how small, was received with gratitude. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the church lawn, Adam and Trinity sat on the worn stone steps. Together, they counted the day's donations, their fingers carefully sorting bills and coins. Trinity's eyes widened as the total grew, and even Adam felt his heart lift with each addition. "Look at this," he said softly, showing Trinity the tally. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. The stack of bills, checks, and coins represented more than money. It was tangible proof that people believed in her. Behind them, the last few church members cleaned up, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. Ms. Evelyn called out that she was leaving another pie for them to take home, and someone else added a container of leftover cookies to the gift. They sat there together, surrounded by the evidence of their community's love and support, both too moved to speak. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a fitting end to a day that had shown them just how much their church family cared. The Starlight Youth Choir studio stood imposing and pristine, its modern glass facade reflecting the morning sun. Trinity's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her dress as she and Adam walked through the entrance. The lobby's polished floors echoed their footsteps, making Trinity feel even more self-conscious. Meredith greeted them with a professionally crisp smile, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Welcome to Starlight," she said, leading them into the practice room. Her eyes lingered on Trinity's nervous movements and her lips tightened slightly. "I understand you have a speech impediment," Meredith stated matter-of-factly, arranging her sheet music. "That could present challenges in our environment." Trinity's shoulders tensed, but Adam placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Trinity's voice speaks for itself," he said quietly but firmly. The practice room felt suddenly smaller as Meredith sat at the grand piano. "We'll start with scales," she announced, her fingers poised over the keys. "Then move on to your prepared piece." Trinity stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together. The first few notes wavered, but as she continued through the scales, her voice grew stronger. The pure, clear tones filled the room, and Meredith's eyebrows rose slightly. When Trinity began her chosen piece, "Amazing Grace," something magical happened. Her stutter disappeared completely in song, replaced by a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul. The notes soared and dipped with natural grace, each phrase perfectly controlled. Meredith's professional facade cracked slightly as she listened, her fingers still on the piano keys. When Trinity finished, the room fell into silence. "Your voice is remarkable," Meredith admitted, turning to face them. "However, our choir demands more than just vocal talent. We have group discussions, introductions at performances, interactions with audience members." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your stutter could impact these aspects significantly." Adam stepped forward. "Trinity has overcome every obstacle she's faced," he said, his voice firm but respectful. "Her determination and resilience are as remarkable as her voice. She deserves a chance to prove herself." Trinity lifted her chin slightly, meeting Meredith's gaze for the first time. I can do this," she said softly but clearly. "But please give me a chance." Meredith studied them both for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. You may join us for practice this Thursday. We'll see how you integrate with the group. That will determine your final acceptance." In the car ride home, Trinity's face glowed with achievement. The sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to mirror her brightness as she sat up straight in her seat, clutching her sheet music to her chest. "You were amazing in there," Adam said, glancing at her proudly. "We're getting closer to making this happen, aren't we?" Trinity nodded, her smile wide and genuine. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered, looking at the sheet music in her hands with renewed determination. Adam turned onto their street, his heart full of hope. The memory of Trinity's voice filling that practice room stayed with him, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The sun hadn't yet risen when Trinity's voice drifted through the quiet house. Sheet music rustled as she arranged it carefully on the piano, her fingers tracing the notes before she began her morning practice. The melody of the prayer filled the rooms, her voice clear and determined despite the early hour. Adam stirred in his bed, awakened by the familiar sound. Through his partially open door, he could hear Trinity repeating the same passage over and over, pushing herself to reach the difficult high notes perfectly. His heart swelled with pride at her dedication, but worry crept in as he noticed the strain in her voice. In the kitchen later that morning, Trinity barely touched her breakfast, her attention fixed on the musical score propped against the orange juice carton. Dark circles had formed under her eyes, and her usually bright face looked drawn and pale. "Maybe we could take a break today," Adam suggested gently, sliding a plate of toast closer to her. "Rest your voice a bit?" Trinity shook her head without looking up. Need to practice," she said firmly, her stutter more pronounced with fatigue. "The choir won't wait." Throughout the day, Trinity maintained her rigorous schedule. Between homework assignments, she squeezed in vocal exercises. During lunch, she listened to recordings of the choir pieces, mouthing the words silently. Adam watched as she pushed herself harder and harder, his concern growing with each passing hour. That evening, during their usual practice session, Trinity's voice suddenly cracked on a high note she'd been struggling with. The sound echoed harshly in the room, and she pressed her hands against the piano in frustration. "Trinity, sweetheart," Adam said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're exhausted. Let's call it a night." "No!" Trinity's response came sharply, surprising them both. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. I have to get this right. I can't fail. Not now. Taking care of yourself isn't failing, Adam tried to reason with her. But Trinity had already turned back to the piano, her fingers finding the opening notes once again. Hours later, after the house had grown quiet and dark, Adam heard the piano keys still being pressed, though more slowly now. He walked downstairs to find Trinity slumped over the piano, her head resting on the keys, fast asleep. Sheet music was scattered around her, and her pencil had rolled onto the floor. With gentle movements, Adam lifted her carefully in his arms. Trinity barely stirred, exhaustion having finally overtaken her determination. As he carried her up the stairs, he whispered softly, "Your dreams matter, sweetheart, but so do you." In her room, he tucked her into bed, smoothing back her hair from her forehead. The moonlight streaming through her window illuminated the sheet music and choir pamphlets covering her desk, testament to her unwavering dedication. Adam's heart ached with both pride and concern as he watched her peaceful, sleeping face, knowing tomorrow would bring another day of relentless practice. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the small attic window as Adam and Trinity worked side by side. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, filled with memories from years past. Adam wiped sweat from his forehead as he moved another heavy box, determined to create a peaceful study space for Trinity. "This should make a nice quiet spot for your homework," he said, shifting some old furniture. "Better than the kitchen table anyway." Trinity nodded as she carefully sorted through a stack of old hymnals. Her movements slowed suddenly as her hand brushed against a weathered cardboard box tucked behind some old choir robes. The faded label caught her eye. "Sarah Daniels, personal items." Her breath caught in her throat. With trembling fingers, she traced the letters of her mother's name. Adam noticed her frozen posture and moved closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Would you like to open it?" he asked softly. Trinity nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She lifted the lid carefully, as if handling something precious and fragile. Inside, she found bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, several cassette tapes in clear plastic cases, and a few worn photographs. She picked up one of the letters, unfolding it with care. The paper was thin and creased, the handwriting elegant but rushed. As she read, her eyes widened. The letter detailed her mother's acceptance into a prestigious choir program and her dreams of touring Europe. Adam found an old cassette player in another box and tested the batteries. To their surprise, it still worked. Trinity selected one of the tapes and inserted it carefully. After a moment of static, a clear, powerful voice filled the attic. The song was Amazing Grace, but performed with such passion and skill that it brought tears to Trinity's eyes. More letters revealed her mother's journey, the struggles with finances, the determination to succeed, the endless hours of practice. One letter spoke of finding out she was pregnant with Trinity and how she planned to continue pursuing her dreams while raising her daughter. "She sounds just like me," Trinity whispered, her stutter barely noticeable as she remained transfixed by another recording. "She wanted what I want." The final letter in the bundle was dated just weeks before her mother's passing. In it, Sarah wrote about her hopes for her baby daughter, wondering if Trinity would inherit her love of music. Trinity's hands shook as she held the last letter, tears streaming down her face. The weight of her mother's dreams, so similar to her own, overwhelmed her. Adam knelt beside her on the dusty attic floor, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as she clutched the letters to her chest. They sat there in silence, surrounded by the echoes of Sarah's voice and the scattered pieces of her story. Through her tears, Trinity felt a new connection to the mother she'd never known, understanding now where her own passion for music had come from. The evening light cast long shadows across Adam's living room as Trinity carefully placed her mother's box on the coffee table. Her fingers traced the worn edges before she took a deep breath and opened it. Adam sat quietly in his armchair, giving her the space to share at her own pace. "This one's from when she first joined the choir," Trinity said softly, her stutter less pronounced as she focused on the letters. She pulled out a cream-colored envelope, its edges softened with age. "Dear Mom," she read, "today was my first real performance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the music sheet. But once I started singing, everything else just faded away." Adam leaned forward, noting how Trinity's voice grew stronger as she continued reading. The letter described Sarah's journey from a nervous newcomer to a confident performer, her words echoing Trinity's own recent experiences. Trinity selected another letter, this one written on pale blue paper. "The conductor says I have a gift," she read. "But more importantly, I have the determination to make something of it. Sometimes I practice until my voice gives out, but I know it'll be worth it someday." Reaching for the cassette player, Trinity inserted one of the tapes. After a moment of crackling static, Sarah's voice filled the room, pure and powerful, singing the Lord's Prayer. The melody soared, each note carrying such emotion that Adam felt tears welling in his eyes. "Your voice," he said gently. "It's so much like hers." Trinity nodded, wiping her own tears. She wrote about wanting to tour with the European Sacred Music Festival, she shared, holding up another letter. She had all these plans. Adam watched as Trinity carefully unfolded more letters, reading passages about late-night rehearsals and dreams of performing in grand cathedrals. When she reached the letters written during Sarah's pregnancy, her voice grew softer. "My little one," she read, "I feel you moving when I sing. I wonder if you'll love music as much as I do. I hope to share this gift with you someday." The room fell quiet except for the gentle whir of the cassette player as another of Sarah's songs began to play. Adam moved to sit beside Trinity on the couch, offering silent support as she sorted through the remaining letters. "She never got to teach me," Trinity whispered, "but somehow I still learned to love it just like she did." "She'd be so proud of you," Adam said warmly. "You're not just following her dream, you're making it your own." Trinity gathered the letters and recordings, holding them close for a moment before walking to Adam's study. She placed them carefully on the shelf next to his collection of hymn books. "I want to keep her close," she said, arranging the items with care, "as I follow in her footsteps." Adam smiled, watching as Trinity stepped back to look at the display, her mother's legacy now having a permanent place in their home. In that moment, he felt their bond grow stronger, united by their shared understanding of Sarah's musical heritage and Trinity's journey to honor it. The idea came to Adam during his morning prayers, a music festival that would showcase Trinity's talent while raising the needed funds. When he presented it to the church council, their enthusiasm was immediate and infectious. "We could set up on the lawn," Ms. Evelyn suggested, her eyes bright with excitement. "String lights between the oak trees, bring in some folding chairs." The whole congregation pitched in over the next few weeks. Men from the construction ministry built a wooden stage, while the women's auxiliary planned refreshments and decorations. Posters appeared in shop windows throughout town, and local newspapers ran small features about the upcoming event. Trinity watched the preparations with growing nervousness, practicing harder than ever. Adam often found her at the piano late into the evening, running through her songs again and again. On the morning of the festival, the church grounds buzzed with activity. Volunteers strung colorful banners between trees, and the aroma of fresh-baked goods filled the air. Food trucks lined the parking lot, and children darted between chairs being arranged in neat rows. Trinity stood at her bedroom window watching the crowd grow. Her hands trembled as she smoothed her new blue dress, a gift from Ms. Evelyn for the occasion. Adam knocked gently on her door. "Ready?" he asked, noticing her anxious expression. She nodded, though her face was pale. As they walked toward the stage, she gripped Adam's hand tightly. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the gathered crowd, and string lights twinkled overhead. Meredith sat in the front row, her expression neutral but attentive. When Trinity took her place on stage, the chattering crowd fell silent. Adam sat at the piano, playing the opening notes of Amazing Grace, the same hymn they'd first shared together. Trinity closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice, clear and pure, soared over the hushed audience. People leaned forward in their chairs, captivated by the emotion in her performance. As she moved into her second song, a traditional spiritual, several audience members wiped away tears. By her final number, the crowd was completely spellbound. When the last note faded away, there was a moment of profound silence before thunderous applause erupted. People rose to their feet, cheering and calling for an encore. Trinity stood frozen, overwhelmed by the response, until Adam gently guided her into a bow. The donation basket filled quickly as people came forward to contribute. Local business owners wrote checks, and elderly church members emptied their wallets. Even children dropped in their pocket money, inspired by Trinity's performance. As the crowd began to disperse, Meredith made her way to the stage. Her usual stern expression had softened, and she approached Trinity with an outstretched hand. "That was quite remarkable," she said, her professional demeanor tinged with genuine admiration. "I'd like you to join us for rehearsal next Tuesday. We'll need to work on your breathing technique, but there's undeniable talent there." Trinity's eyes widened and she looked to Adam, who nodded encouragingly. Adam felt his heart swell with pride as he watched Trinity shake Meredith's hand, accepting the invitation with a shy smile. The morning after the festival, Trinity walked into church feeling different. People who had never spoken to her before stopped to shake her hand or pat her shoulder. Their warm smiles and kind words made her cheeks flush with pride. "Your voice touched my heart," Mrs. Peterson said, clasping Trinity's hands in hers. "Just like an angel singing." "That performance was something special," Mr. Thompson added, his eyes twinkling. "My wife cried through the whole thing." Adam watched from nearby, his heart full as he observed Trinity's shy but genuine responses. Though she still stuttered when speaking, she held her head higher, and her shoulders weren't as hunched as before. Each compliment seemed to build her confidence bit by bit. After the service, Meredith approached them in the church foyer. Her professional demeanor remained, but there was a new warmth in her eyes as she addressed Trinity. "I've spoken with the board," Meredith said, pulling out an official-looking envelope. "We'd like you to join us for a formal rehearsal this Tuesday. The Starlight Youth Choir has high standards, but after last night's performance, I believe you might be up to the challenge." Trinity's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. She glanced at Adam, who nodded encouragingly. Thank you," Trinity managed, clutching the invitation to her chest. "We'll be there," Adam assured Meredith, placing a supportive hand on Trinity's shoulder. Over the next 2 days, Adam helped Trinity prepare. They practiced breathing exercises and worked on the choir's current repertoire, which Meredith had provided. Trinity threw herself into the preparation, determined to prove herself worthy of this opportunity. When Tuesday arrived, they drove to the prestigious rehearsal hall where the Starlight Youth Choir practiced. The building's grand architecture made Trinity pause at the entrance, but Adam's steady presence gave her courage to continue. Inside, 30 young singers were already warming up, their voices blended in perfect harmony, filling the space with rich sound. Trinity's nervousness showed in her tight grip on her music folder, but she took her place in the soprano section as directed. Meredith called for attention and began the rehearsal. As they moved through the pieces, Trinity's clear, pure voice found its place within the group. The other choir members exchanged impressed glances as her voice soared above the harmony exactly where needed, then melded perfectly with the group in the following measures. During a particularly challenging passage when several singers struggled with the timing, Trinity held her part steadily, helping guide the others back on track. Meredith noticed, giving her an approving nod. "Well done, Trinity," Meredith said during a break. "Your pitch control is excellent, and you have good instincts for harmony. We'll need to work on your breath support for the longer phrases, but you're already proving to be an asset to the group." Adam, watching from his seat near the piano, felt tears prick his eyes as he saw Trinity's face light up at the praise. She belonged here, among these talented young people, sharing her gift with the world. The scared, withdrawn girl who had first entered his home was blossoming into a confident young musician before his eyes. The next day, a plain white envelope sat innocently among the bills and advertisements in Adam's mailbox. No return address marked its surface, just his name and address typed in stark black letters. As he opened it at his kitchen table, his hands trembled slightly, though he couldn't explain why. The letter inside was typed on standard paper, but its words felt like daggers. "Pastor Reyes is using an orphaned girl for his own gain," it began. "He parades her around like a show pony, collecting donations and attention. This is not about Trinity's dreams, it's about his ego and his church's reputation." Adam's coffee grew cold beside him as he read the accusations over and over. The letter went on to question his motives, suggesting he was manipulating Trinity's vulnerability for publicity. But what made his blood run cold was the final paragraph. A copy of this letter has been forwarded to Judge Harper's office for consideration in the pending adoption case. His legs felt weak as he sank into his chair. The adoption hearing was just weeks away, and now this anonymous attack threatened everything he and Trinity had built together. The thought of these lies reaching Judge Harper made his stomach churn. Later that afternoon, he sat in Ms. Evelyn's living room, the letter crumpled in his hands. The elderly soprano had been a pillar of the church community for decades, and her wisdom had guided many through difficult times. "They're saying I'm exploiting her," Adam's voice cracked, "that I'm using her talent for my own benefit. What if Judge Harper believes this?" Ms. Evelyn adjusted her reading glasses and studied the letter carefully. Her living room, filled with family photos and well-worn furniture, felt like a safe harbor in the storm of Adam's worry. "Nonsense," she declared firmly, setting the letter down. "Anyone who's seen you with Trinity knows the truth. The way you encourage her, protect her, love her like your own, that can't be faked." "But the judge," Adam started. "The judge will see the truth too," Ms. Evelyn interrupted. "Your actions speak louder than any anonymous letter. Think about how Trinity has flourished under your care. That's what matters." Adam nodded slowly, drawing strength from her conviction. After a moment of thought, he straightened his shoulders. "I need to address this head-on," he said. "I'll speak to the congregation this Sunday. They should hear the truth from me directly." "That's right," Ms. Evelyn agreed, patting his hand. "Stand tall and speak your truth. The community knows your heart, Adam. They'll stand behind you." As he drove home, Adam's mind raced with the words he would say on Sunday. He had to be careful. Trinity didn't need to know about this letter, not when she was finally finding her confidence. He would protect her from this shadow of doubt, just as he had promised to protect her from the moment she entered his home. The whispers started like a gentle breeze but quickly grew into a storm. Trinity first noticed them during Sunday coffee hour, the way conversations would suddenly stop when she walked by, how some church members avoided eye contact. She lingered near the kitchen door, pretending to fix her shoe while two elderly women spoke in hushed tones. "It does seem convenient, doesn't it?" one whispered. "A talented orphan girl bringing in all those donations?" "And Pastor Adam's church attendance has doubled since she started singing," the other replied. Trinity's hands trembled as she clutched her sheet music closer to her chest. The words stung like tiny needles, making her question everything she thought she knew about her new life. During choir practice, she caught Meredith giving Adam strange looks. Even Ms. Evelyn, usually warm and encouraging, seemed distracted and concerned. Trinity's voice wavered during her solo, her confidence crumbling under the weight of doubt. At home, Adam noticed the change immediately. Trinity's usual evening practice session was silent, her beloved piano untouched. When he knocked on her bedroom door, her responses were short and distant. "Trinity, sweetheart, is everything okay?" Adam asked, his voice gentle as he stood in her doorway. "I'm fine," she mumbled, not looking up from her homework. "Just tired." "You barely touched your dinner. If something's bothering you—" "Why did you really want to foster me?" Trinity interrupted, her words sharp and sudden. "Was it because of my voice?" Adam felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Trinity, no, I heard them talking," she continued, her stutter returning as emotions overwhelmed her. "About the donations and the church growing and how convenient it all is." "Those are just rumors," Adam said, taking a step forward. "None of that is true." But Trinity shrank away from him, shaking her head. "Maybe you just wanted someone to make your church famous, like a circus act." "You know that's not true," Adam pleaded. "Everything we've done, the festivals, the choir, it's all been for your dreams, not mine." Trinity turned away, her shoulders rigid. "I need to be alone." Adam stood helplessly in the hallway, listening as Trinity pulled out her mother's old cassette player. The familiar melody of her mother's voice drifted through the door, a barrier between them as solid as any wall. In his study, Adam sank into his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The adoption hearing was approaching fast, and now this wedge of doubt threatened to destroy everything. He clasped his hands together, bowing his head in prayer. "Lord, give me strength," he whispered. "Help me show Trinity the truth in my heart." The house felt colder somehow, split by the silence between them. In her room, Trinity curled up on her bed, her mother's voice filling the empty spaces where trust used to live. Adam remained in his study, surrounded by sheet music and memories, praying for a way to bridge the growing divide between them. The Sunday morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the congregation. Adam stood at the pulpit, his hands steady but his heart racing. The familiar faces of his church family looked back at him, some concerned, others encouraging. "My friends," he began, his voice clear and strong, "I need to address the rumors that have been circulating about Trinity and me." He paused, looking at the empty spot where Trinity usually sat. "When I first read Trinity's file at the foster care office, what moved me wasn't her musical talent. I didn't even know about that then. What touched my heart was seeing a child who needed love, just as I needed purpose after losing my wife." The congregation sat in respectful silence as Adam continued. "Every decision I've made has been to support Trinity's dreams, not my own. The fundraisers, the festivals. These weren't about growing our church or gaining recognition. They were about showing a young girl that she matters, that her dreams matter." Ms. Evelyn stood up from her seat in the front row. "Pastor Adam took Trinity in when no one else would," she declared. "I've watched him stay up late helping with her homework, cooking healthy meals, and most importantly, being the father she never had." One by one, other church members rose to speak. Mr. Thompson, the church treasurer, vouched for Adam's careful documentation of all donations. Mrs. Chen shared how she'd witnessed Adam comforting Trinity after a particularly difficult day at school. "I'll write a letter to Judge Harper right now," Ms. Evelyn announced, pulling out a notebook. "Anyone who wants to join me can stay after service." The response was immediate. Dozens of hands shot up and people began sharing their own stories of witnessing Adam and Trinity's journey together. The church secretary brought out paper and pens, distributing them among the congregation. As the service concluded, people gathered in small groups, crafting heartfelt letters describing Adam's character and his genuine love for Trinity. Ms. Evelyn collected them carefully, organizing them into a neat stack. "We'll make sure Judge Harper sees the truth," she assured Adam, squeezing his hand. When Adam returned home that afternoon, he found Trinity sitting on the living room couch, her mother's letters spread out on the coffee table. She looked up as he entered, her eyes red but clear. "I heard what you said at church today," she said softly. "I was listening from the back." Adam sat down beside her, giving her space but staying close. "Every word was true, Trinity." "I know," she whispered. "Thank you for fighting for me, for believing in me even when I didn't believe in you." Trinity reached over and took Adam's hand, a gesture that said more than words ever could. The trust between them, though tested, had emerged stronger than before. The evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Trinity sat on the wooden porch steps, her chin resting on her knees. Adam noticed her from the kitchen window and quietly made his way outside. The floorboards creaked softly under his feet as he settled beside her, leaving enough space to respect her boundaries. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the clouds drift by. Then Adam spoke, his voice gentle and warm. "You know, I still remember the day you first came here. You wouldn't look me in the eye, but when you saw that piano, there was this tiny spark." Trinity turned slightly toward him, her shoulders relaxing a fraction. "I was so scared," she admitted quietly. "I was too," Adam confessed. "I kept wondering if I could be enough, if I could give you the home you deserved." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Everything since then, every decision, every effort, has been about helping you find your voice and your happiness." Trinity's fingers twisted in her lap. "When I heard those rumors," her voice cracked slightly. "People were saying you only wanted me for the church choir, that you were using me to make yourself look good." Adam's heart ached at the pain in her voice. "Trinity, look at me," he said softly. When she met his eyes, he continued, "Before I even knew you could sing, I knew I wanted to be your father. Your gift for music? That's just part of who you are, and I'm blessed to help you share it with the world." Tears welled up in Trinity's eyes. I felt so confused. Part of me knew they were wrong, but another part... She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I've never had anyone fight for me before. Sometimes it feels too good to be true." "I understand that fear," Adam replied. "When I lost your mother, my wife, I thought I'd never find purpose again. But God brought you into my life, and you've given me more joy than I ever thought possible." Trinity's breath hitched. "Really?" "Really," Adam affirmed. "You're not just some project or choir member to me, Trinity. You're my daughter in every way that matters." The weight of weeks of uncertainty seemed to lift from Trinity's shoulders. She shifted closer to Adam, leaning against his arm. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for," Adam assured her. "Those rumors were designed to hurt us both, but they failed because what we have, this family we're building, it's real." Trinity turned suddenly, wrapping her arms around Adam in a tight hug. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I love you, Dad." Adam held her close, his own eyes growing misty as they shared this moment of healing and renewed trust. The setting sun cast long shadows across the porch, but the darkness couldn't touch the warmth of their reconciliation. The morning sun streamed through Adam's study window as he answered his phone. His heart sank as he listened to the adoption agency representative's stern voice explaining the situation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reyes, but there appears to be a significant oversight in Trinity's documentation," the representative said. "Without proper international travel clearance and complete adoption records, she won't be able to leave the country with the choir." Adam's hand tightened around the phone. "But we've submitted everything required. How could this happen now, just a week before departure?" "Some crucial documents from Trinity's early childhood are missing. We'll need those, along with updated court approvals before she can travel internationally." Trinity stood in the hallway, frozen as she caught fragments of the conversation. Her fingers clutched the doorframe, knuckles turning white. The choir tour, her chance to honor her mother's memory, seemed to be slipping through her fingers. Adam paced the study, running his free hand through his gray hair. "I'll contact Judge Harper's office immediately. There must be something we can do to expedite this." After ending the call, he noticed Trinity in the doorway. Her face had gone pale and her hands trembled slightly. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her stutter more pronounced with anxiety. "There's just some paperwork we need to sort out," Adam explained, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm going to call Judge Harper right now." Trinity sank into the armchair by the window, watching as Adam dialed the judge's office. She wrapped her arms around herself, remembering all the hours of practice, all the dreams of performing internationally. The thought of missing the tour made her chest tight with fear. Adam spent the next hour making calls, his voice growing more urgent with each conversation. He contacted the agency multiple times, spoke with Judge Harper's clerk, and even reached out to Mrs. Lane, their original social worker. "Please understand," he pleaded during one call. "This tour means everything to her. There must be a way to fast-track these documents." Trinity listened as Adam advocated for her, his determination evident in every word. Still, she could hear the worry in his voice, matching the anxiety building in her own heart. When Adam finally set down the phone, he turned to find Trinity with tears in her eyes. "What if I can't go?" she whispered. "What if everything we've worked for doesn't matter?" Adam crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "We're going to figure this out together. I promise you that I will do everything in my power to make this right." Trinity nodded, trying to believe him despite her fears. Adam squeezed her hand gently, his presence steady and reassuring even as uncertainty loomed before them. "We've overcome every obstacle so far," he reminded her. "This is just another challenge, and we'll face it the same way we faced everything else. Together." Trinity managed a small smile, drawing strength from his unwavering support. Though worry still gnawed at both their hearts, They found comfort in knowing they would navigate this setback as a family. The Sunday morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the wooden pews. Adam stood at the pulpit, his hands gripping its edges as he addressed the congregation. His voice carried both worry and hope as he explained the situation with Trinity's travel documentation. "We've come so far together," he said, his eyes scanning the familiar faces before him. "But now we face another challenge. Trinity needs specific paperwork cleared before she can travel with the choir, and time is running short." Trinity sat in the front pew, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She watched as concerned murmurs rippled through the congregation. Ms. Evelyn, seated beside her, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Before Adam could even finish explaining their needs, hands began raising throughout the church. Mr. Peterson, a retired lawyer, stood up first. "I have contacts in family court who might be able to help expedite things," he offered, his voice firm with determination. Mrs. Martinez, who worked at the county clerk's office, raised her hand next. "I can help navigate the documentation requirements. Sometimes it's just knowing which forms to file and where." One by one, church members stepped forward with offers of assistance. Some proposed organizing additional fundraisers to cover any legal fees. Others offered to make calls to their connections in various government offices. Trinity felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched the community rally around them. Her stutter momentarily forgotten, she whispered to Ms. Evelyn, "They really care about helping us." "Of course we do, sweetheart," Ms. Evelyn replied softly. "You're part of our family now." The church secretary began taking notes, organizing the offers of help into actionable steps. A small committee formed on the spot, ready to tackle the paperwork challenges head-on. Trinity stood up, gathering her courage, and walked to stand beside Adam at the altar. Though her voice shook slightly, she addressed the congregation. "Thank you all so much," she managed, her gratitude evident despite her stutter. Adam wrapped an arm around Trinity's shoulders, his eyes bright with emotion as he surveyed their church family. "We are blessed beyond measure by your support," he said, his voice thick with feeling. As the service drew to a close, people gathered around them, offering words of encouragement and support. The atmosphere in the church hummed with determination and hope. Trinity felt surrounded by love and acceptance, knowing that these people believed in her dream as much as she did. Standing at the altar with Adam, Trinity watched as church members organized themselves into groups, already planning their various tasks. The weight of worry that had settled on her shoulders began to lift, replaced by a warm sense of belonging and renewed hope. Adam squeezed her shoulder gently as he thanked everyone one last time for their incredible support. Trinity looked up at him, seeing the same hope reflected in his eyes that she felt in her heart. Trinity sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, carefully handling the worn cassette tape. The familiar click of the player echoed in the quiet room as she pressed play. Her mother's voice filled the space, rich and warm, singing an old hymn that Trinity now knew by heart. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. The melody carried hints of determination and dreams that reminded Trinity of her own journey. Her fingers traced the edges of her mother's letters spread out before her, each one telling stories of persistence in the face of obstacles. "I won't give up, Mom," she whispered to the empty room, her stutter less pronounced in these private moments. "I'll make you proud." Down the hall in his study, Adam knelt beside his desk chair, his head bowed in prayer. The evening light cast long shadows across the room's wooden floors. His whispered words carried the weight of recent challenges and hopes for Trinity's future. "Lord, give us strength," he prayed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Show us the path forward." He opened his eyes, gazing at the family photo on his desk, one of the first pictures taken of him and Trinity together at church. The memory of that day brought a smile to his face, reminding him of how far they'd come. From the shy, withdrawn girl who first entered his home to the determined young woman she was becoming. The sound of footsteps in the hallway caught his attention. Trinity appeared in the doorway, still clutching one of her mother's cassettes. Her eyes held a new determination that Adam had come to recognize. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Adam nodded, gesturing to the chair beside his desk. Trinity settled into it, placing the cassette carefully on the desk between them. "Mom never stopped trying," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Even when things got hard, she kept singing, kept believing in her dreams." Adam listened intently, noting how Trinity's stutter eased when she spoke about her mother. "She wrote about times when people told her to give up," Trinity continued, picking up one of the letters she'd brought with her. "But she didn't. She kept going." She looked up at Adam, her eyes bright with purpose. "Just like we need to do now." Adam reached across the desk, gently squeezing her hand. "Your mother's strength lives on in you, Trinity. I see it every day." Trinity smiled, a rare, full smile that lit up her whole face. "We're going to make this work, aren't we? The paperwork, the choir, everything?" "Yes," Adam replied with quiet conviction. "Together, we'll find a way. Your mother never gave up on her dreams, and neither will we." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their shared determination filling the room. The evening light softened around them, and the cassette tape sat between them like a bridge connecting past to present, mother to daughter, dreams to reality. The dining room table was covered with neatly arranged stacks of papers, each one representing a piece of their journey together. Adam and Trinity sat side by side, reviewing each document with careful attention. The warm afternoon light streamed through the windows, casting a gentle glow on the letters of support from their church family. "Look at this one," Adam said, sliding a handwritten letter toward Trinity. "Ms. Evelyn wrote about how your voice brings joy to everyone at church." Trinity's fingers traced the flowing handwriting, her eyes growing misty as she read the kind words. Her stutter emerged slightly as she responded, "She's always been so nice to me." Adam sorted through another pile, organizing the legal documents they'd finally managed to secure. "Everything's here now," he said confidently. "The missing paperwork has been replaced, and we have all the proper signatures." Trinity nodded, carefully straightening a stack of papers. The dining room clock ticked steadily in the background as they worked, its rhythm matching the steady determination in their hearts. Later that afternoon, Adam sat across from Judge Harper in her chambers, his hands steady as he presented the carefully compiled materials. The judge's office was warm and welcoming, with sunlight filtering through vertical blinds and casting striped shadows across her desk. "These letters," Judge Harper said, adjusting her reading glasses as she examined the testimonials. "They speak volumes about your dedication, Pastor Reyes." Adam sat up straighter in his chair. "Our congregation has been incredibly supportive," he replied. "They've witnessed Trinity's growth firsthand." Judge Harper picked up Ms. Evelyn's letter, her expression softening as she read. "I see here that Trinity has become quite an inspiration to your church community." "She has," Adam agreed, his voice filled with pride. "The way she's overcome her challenges, especially with her stutter, has touched many hearts." The judge continued reviewing the documents, nodding approvingly at the resolved paperwork issues. "You've been very thorough in addressing the administrative concerns," she noted, shuffling through the papers. "And these testimonials about Trinity's progress are quite moving." As they walked out of the courthouse together, Trinity reached for Adam's hand, squeezing it gently. The afternoon sun warmed their faces as they descended the stone steps. Thank you," Trinity said softly, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "for not giving up on me." Adam looked down at her, seeing not just the shy girl who had first entered his home, but the strong young woman she was becoming. The courthouse steps were filled with other people coming and going, but in that moment, it felt like just the two of them, united in their hope for the future. Trinity's grip on his hand tightened as they reached the bottom of the steps. "You fought for me," she continued, her words coming more easily now. "Even when things got hard." Around them, the usual bustle of courthouse activity continued, but they remained in their quiet bubble of shared gratitude and anticipation, both feeling hopeful about the upcoming hearing that would determine their future as a family. The courtroom buzzed with quiet energy, as familiar faces from the church filled the wooden benches. Ms. Evelyn sat in the front row, her gentle smile offering encouragement. Trinity's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her navy blue dress, a gift from the church ladies for this special day. Adam placed his hand over Trinity's shaking fingers. "We're all here for you," he whispered. Judge Harper entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. The familiar faces rose and then settled back into their seats. Trinity caught glimpses of the choir members, Sunday school teachers, and even Mrs. Peterson, who always brought extra cookies to church events. When Trinity was called to the stand, her footsteps echoed in the hushed courtroom. She took a deep breath, remembering all the moments that had led to this day. Her voice, usually hindered by her stutter, found strength as she began to speak. "Before I met Adam," she started, her stutter present but not overwhelming, "I didn't know what having a real home felt like." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But he never rushed me or made me feel different because of my stutter. He just waited and listened." Trinity's voice grew steadier as she continued. "When he found out about my mother being a singer, he didn't just support my dream of joining the choir. He made it possible. He worked extra hours, organized fundraisers, and never stopped believing in me." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Adam. "The choir tour isn't just about singing anymore. It's about honoring my mother's memory and showing Adam that his faith in me wasn't wrong." When Adam took the stand, his voice carried the warmth that had first made Trinity trust him. "From the moment I met Trinity," he testified, "I knew God had brought her into my life for a reason. She's not just a child I'm fostering. She's the daughter of my heart." He spoke about their shared love of music, their evening practices at the piano, and how Trinity's presence had filled the emptiness in his home with purpose and joy. "Supporting her dreams isn't a burden," he said firmly. "It's a privilege." The congregation members nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears. Ms. Evelyn reached over to squeeze Trinity's shoulder as she returned to her seat beside Adam. Judge Harper's expression remained neutral as she made notes, though her eyes softened at several points during the testimonies. When both had finished speaking, she adjusted her glasses and looked at the gathered crowd, then back to Trinity and Adam. "I will take everything I've heard today under careful consideration," she announced, her voice carrying through the quiet courtroom. "My decision will be delivered shortly." Trinity felt Adam's steady presence beside her as they rose for the judge's exit. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation, but also with love and support from their church family, who had become such an integral part of their journey. The courtroom doors opened as Judge Harper returned to her bench, her black robes rustling as she took her seat. The afternoon sun filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Trinity's hand tightened around Adam's as they stood, waiting for the moment that would define their future. Judge Harper adjusted her glasses and looked down at the papers before her. The congregation members leaned forward in their seats, the air thick with anticipation. Ms. Evelyn clasped her hands in silent prayer. After careful consideration of all testimonies and evidence presented, Judge Harper began, her voice clear and measured. "I am moved by the extraordinary journey that has brought us here today." She paused, looking directly at Trinity and Adam. "What we've witnessed in this courtroom goes beyond legal requirements. We've seen the true meaning of family and community." Trinity's breath caught in her throat as Judge Harper continued. "Mr. Reyes has demonstrated not just the ability to provide a stable home, but the dedication to nurture Trinity's dreams. The overwhelming support from your church community proves that this child will have not just a father, but an entire extended family to rely on." Judge Harper's expression softened as she addressed Trinity directly. "Young lady, your courage in sharing your story and your determination to honor your mother's legacy through music is remarkable. It's clear that you found not just a home, but a place where your spirit can truly flourish." Looking back at her documents, Judge Harper's voice took on an official tone. "It is therefore my pleasure to approve this adoption and grant all necessary clearances for Trinity's participation in the upcoming choir tour. Let the record show that Trinity Daniels will henceforth be legally known as Trinity Reyes." The gavel struck with a resounding crack and soft applause rippled through the courtroom. Trinity turned to Adam, tears streaming down her face. He wrapped his arms around her, his own eyes glistening with joy. "My daughter," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Finally. Officially. My daughter. The congregation members rose to their feet, their quiet celebration filling the courtroom with warmth. Ms. Evelyn approached them, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Trinity buried her face in Adam's chest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Years of uncertainty had led to this. She finally had a real father, a real home, and a chance to fulfill her dreams. Judge Harper watched the scene with a gentle smile, allowing the family a moment to absorb the significance of what had just occurred. The afternoon sun caught the tears on Trinity's cheeks as she held on to Adam, both of them overwhelmed by the weight of their newfound official bond and the bright future that lay ahead. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of the Reyes home as Trinity methodically folded her choir uniforms. Her suitcase lay open on her bed, surrounded by neat piles of carefully selected items. Down the hall, Adam checked and double-checked the tour itinerary, making notes about important contact numbers and addresses. "Don't forget your warm sweater," Adam called out, remembering the weather report for their first destination. "The mountains can get chilly, even in summer." Trinity smiled, already having packed it. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric of her choir robe, still amazed that this was really happening. The past few days had been a whirlwind of preparation, shopping for necessities, organizing documents, and attending final rehearsals. Adam appeared in her doorway holding a small travel kit. "I got you something," he said, stepping into the room. Inside were travel-sized toiletries, a compact first aid kit, and a small notebook with emergency contacts. "Your mother would have thought of these things," he added softly. Trinity's eyes welled up with gratitude. She watched as Adam settled into the chair by her desk, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he began, "your new mom, my Catherine, she loved traveling too. We spent our first anniversary in Europe singing in little churches along the way." Sitting cross-legged on her bed, Trinity listened intently as Adam shared stories of his travels with Catherine. He told her about missed trains and unexpected detours that turned into wonderful adventures, about making friends in strange cities and finding beauty in unfamiliar places. "The first night away is always the hardest," Adam admitted, his voice gentle. "But remember, home isn't just a place. It's the love we carry in our hearts." Trinity nodded, understanding. She reached for the stack of photos on her nightstand, one of her mother, young and radiant, standing before a microphone, and another of Catherine, Adam's late wife, smiling warmly at the camera. With careful movements, she placed both photos in a double frame, wrapping it in a soft t-shirt before tucking it into her suitcase. "They'll be watching over you," Adam said softly, watching her gentle handling of the photos. "Just like I'll be thinking of you every day." Trinity moved across the room and hugged him tightly. "I'm nervous," she admitted, her stutter slight but present, "but excited too." Adam squeezed her shoulders reassuringly. "That's exactly how you should feel. It means you're ready for this adventure." Together, they finished packing, Adam sharing tips about rolling clothes to save space and keeping important documents easily accessible. He told her about the time Catherine had forgotten her passport and how they'd had to drive 3 hours back home to retrieve it, laughing now at what had seemed like a disaster then. As the evening wore on, Trinity carefully positioned the framed photos between layers of clothing, ensuring they would travel safely. The simple act felt profound, carrying the love and legacy of both mothers with her on this journey that meant so much to all of them. The church sanctuary glowed with warm light as the congregation filled the wooden pews. Colorful flowers adorned the altar, and handwritten cards of encouragement decorated a special bulletin board near the entrance. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as people settled into their seats, all gathered to celebrate Trinity's upcoming journey. Pastor Matthews opened the service with a heartfelt prayer, thanking God for bringing Trinity into their community and asking for blessings on her upcoming tour. Adam sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, watching as Trinity made her way to the piano. She wore a simple blue dress that matched the evening sky visible through the stained glass windows. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her sheet music, but her eyes held determination. The congregation fell silent as Trinity's fingers touched the keys. The first notes of Amazing Grace filled the sanctuary. Trinity's voice, clear and pure, rose above the piano accompaniment. The familiar hymn took on new meaning through her interpretation, each word carrying the weight of her gratitude and hope. Adam watched his daughter, tears welling in his eyes as her voice soared through the verses. In the third row, Meredith nodded approvingly, her usual stern expression softened by Trinity's heartfelt performance. Ms. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while other church members swayed gently to the music. As the final notes faded, a moment of reverent silence hung in the air before the congregation burst into applause. Trinity stood, her cheeks flushed with emotion, and made her way down the steps from the piano. Church members reached out to touch her shoulders or squeeze her hand as she passed. One by one, people came forward to offer their blessings. Mrs. Rodriguez presented Trinity with a handmade scarf for the cool mountain evenings. Mr. Jenkins, the retired music teacher, gave her a leather-bound journal to record her experiences. Each gift came with words of encouragement and promises of prayers. Meredith approached Trinity with unusual warmth, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've earned this," she said firmly. "Your voice will touch many hearts on this tour." The service concluded with the entire congregation forming a circle around Trinity and Adam, joining hands in prayer. Pastor Matthews led them in blessing Trinity's journey, his voice thick with emotion. As the final Amen echoed through the sanctuary, Trinity turned to Adam. She wrapped her arms around him tightly, pressing her face against his shoulder. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered, her words barely audible over the continued applause of the congregation. Adam held his daughter close, his heart full of pride and love, as their church family surrounded them with their support and celebration. The sanctuary rang with joy and appreciation for the remarkable young woman Trinity had become, and the journey that lay ahead of her. The early morning sun streamed through the airport's glass walls as Adam and Trinity made their way through the bustling terminal. Trinity clutched her carry-on bag, her knuckles white with nervous energy. Adam kept a steady hand on her shoulder, guiding her through the crowd while pulling her rolling suitcase. At the check-in counter, Trinity handed over her passport with trembling fingers. The airline attendant smiled warmly, noticing her nervousness. "First time flying?" she asked kindly. Trinity nodded, managing a small smile in return. As they walked toward security, Adam pointed out the different signs and explained the screening process. Trinity listened intently, her eyes wide as she took in the controlled chaos around them. The sound of announcements echoed through the terminal, mixing with the steady hum of travelers rushing to their destinations. They found a quiet corner near the gate where other choir members were gathering. Adam bought them both hot chocolate from a nearby cafe, and they sat watching planes take off through the large windows. Trinity wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the familiar comfort settle her nerves. "Remember what we practiced," Adam said gently. "Deep breaths when you feel overwhelmed, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it." Trinity nodded, sipping her drink carefully. "I packed Mom's recording in my carry-on," she whispered, her stutter barely noticeable. "Right next to the photo of you both." Adam reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound journal with Trinity's name embossed on the cover. "I want you to write everything down," he said, placing it in her hands. "Every city, every performance, every feeling. Sometimes the smallest moments turn out to be the most precious memories." Trinity ran her fingers over the soft leather, touched by the thoughtful gift. The final boarding call crackled over the speakers, causing her to jump slightly. Around them, other choir members began gathering their belongings and saying goodbye to their families. Adam stood, helping Trinity collect her things. He straightened her jacket and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, fighting back tears. Trinity looked up at him, her own eyes glistening. "You're ready for this," Adam assured her, his voice steady despite his emotion. "Your voice is going to touch so many hearts, just like it touched mine." Trinity threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "I'll sing every song for you and Mom," she whispered, holding him tightly. Adam hugged her back, memorizing the moment, before gently releasing her as the last call for boarding was announced. With one final squeeze of his hand, Trinity turned and joined the line of choir members heading down the jet bridge. She looked back once, waving bravely, before disappearing into the plane. Adam pressed his palm against the cool terminal window, watching as Trinity's plane slowly taxied down the runway. The morning sun caught the aircraft's silver wings, making them gleam like a promise. His heart felt both full and hollow at the same time, pride swelling in his chest while a father's worry tugged at his thoughts. As the plane lined up for takeoff, Adam's mind drifted back to that first day in the foster care office. Trinity had been so small then, hunched over her notebook, afraid to meet anyone's eyes. He remembered the way she'd flinched at sudden movements and how her stutter had made even the simplest conversations a challenge. The plane's engines roared to life and Adam smiled, thinking of the first time Trinity had sung in the church, how her voice had soared, pure and clear, without a trace of hesitation. The memory of the congregation's stunned silence still gave him goosebumps. His thoughts turned to the anonymous letter that had nearly derailed everything. The hurt in Trinity's eyes when she'd overheard the gossip had been almost unbearable. But even that dark time had strengthened their bond, proving to both of them that their connection was real and lasting. The plane began to move faster down the runway, and Adam's chest tightened with emotion. He thought of the adoption hearing, of Trinity's brave testimony, and of Judge Harper's approving smile. The way Trinity had thrown herself into his arms after the ruling, whispering "Dad" for the first time. It had been worth every struggle, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. As the plane lifted off the ground, Adam watched it climb higher and higher into the morning sky. His daughter, his beautiful, talented, brave daughter, was finally pursuing her dreams. The same dreams her mother had once held, now given new life through Trinity's voice. The aircraft banked slightly, catching the sunlight one final time before disappearing into a bank of clouds. Adam stood there for several more minutes, his hand still resting against the window. Pride swelled in his chest, replacing the initial ache of separation. Trinity wasn't just that frightened girl with a stutter anymore. She was a confident young woman with a voice that could move hearts and the courage to share it with the world. Adam finally lowered his hand from the glass, straightening his shoulders. He had work to do, preparing for Trinity's return, maintaining their home, continuing his ministry with renewed purpose. His daughter was soaring toward her dreams, and he would be here, steadfast and supportive, ensuring she always had a safe place to land. The church buzzed with activity as Adam stood in the center of the sanctuary, directing volunteers who hung streamers and arranged flowers. Ms. Evelyn balanced precariously on a stepladder, positioning a Welcome Home Trinity banner above the altar. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting warm patches of colored light across the wooden pews. "Pastor Adam, where would you like the photo display?" called out Jerry, one of the deacons, holding a carefully crafted collage of Trinity's journey with the choir. Adam gestured toward the entrance. "Let's put it in the foyer where everyone can see it as they come in." His eyes lingered on a particular photo of Trinity singing at her first church performance, her face radiating joy despite her initial fears. As he moved through the bustling space, checking off items on his planning list, Adam felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. The past few months without Trinity had been challenging, but they had also given him time to appreciate how profoundly she had changed his life. Before her arrival, he had been going through the motions, his faith steady but lacking the vibrancy it once had. Now, watching his congregation come together to celebrate his daughter's return, he saw God's hand in every step of their journey. Mrs. Peterson from the quilting circle approached with a handmade banner covered in encouraging messages from the youth group. "The children insisted on adding their own touches," she explained, pointing to the colorful drawings surrounding the words. Adam ran his fingers over the fabric, touched by the thoughtfulness. The church kitchen door swung open, releasing the aroma of fresh-baked cookies and coffee as the hospitality committee prepared refreshments. Even those who had initially been skeptical of Trinity's adoption had become her fierce supporters, transformed by witnessing her growth and determination. "Pastor," Ms. Evelyn called from her perch on the ladder, "remember how quiet she was that first Sunday? Now look at all this, celebrating our Trinity, the choir soloist. Her eyes sparkled with pride. Adam nodded, remembering the trembling girl who could barely speak. The transformation hadn't just been Trinity's. He had changed, too. Her presence had awakened parts of his heart he thought had died with his wife, showing him that love could multiply rather than divide. The afternoon light shifted, and Adam paused in his work to watch the volunteers. Some arranged chairs, while others hung photos and decorations. Their chatter and laughter filled the sanctuary with warmth. This was more than just a homecoming celebration. It was a testament to the power of faith, love, and community. As the final preparations came together, Adam stood in the center of the sanctuary. The space had been transformed with flowers, banners, and twinkling lights. Photos of Trinity's journey lined the walls, telling the story of a shy girl who found her voice through love and acceptance. Looking at it all, Adam whispered, "This is only the beginning." If you enjoyed the story of Trinity and Adam, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.